What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. One question I've been reflecting on lately is just how do therapists feel about being a therapist? We've talked before about how the pay is so little, it's so difficult to get licensed. There's a laundry list of things that make this a challenging profession. And so, do therapists regret becoming a therapist? That was my question. And this week I thought I would put a poll on Instagram inviting you all to tell me the answer to that question. 345 of you responded. My goodness, thank you. So in today's video, I'm going to share those responses with you all, look for any themes in your expanded replies, and then just kind of dissect this a little bit. Is this a satisfying profession or not? Or is it something a bit more complicated than that? So without further ado, let's dive into these responses so we can try to answer this question. Would therapists still choose this profession if they could start over? So the initial question that I posted to Instagram stories was, if you could go back in time, would you still become a therapist? And people could answer yes, no, or unsure. Because we're therapists, we're not prone towards black and white thinking, and I wanted to give the option of putting something in the middle. And I'm glad I did, because out of 345 total responses, 86 said that they felt unsure about whether they would still become a therapist if they could go back in time. So that's exactly 25% of people who responded saying they're unsure. But the good news is 64% of those who responded said yes, they would choose to become a therapist. That's 220 of the people who responded, so I take that as good news overall. And then 11% of people who responded said no, they would not become a therapist if they could do it all over again. So that means that in total, 36% of people who responded either said no, they wouldn't become a therapist, or they were unsure. Maybe it kind of depends on certain things. 1 in 3 therapists saying they're at least unsure about whether they would become a therapist if they could do it all over again. That's not the greatest. Fortunately, I'm glad I posted a prompt inviting folks to expand on their reply. Say more about whether you'd still be a therapist if you could do it over again. 32 people offered their responses, and I tried to organize it into themes. Now, of the replies that were on the more positive side of things, advocating for why somebody would still choose to be a therapist if they could do it over again, I was pretty surprised to find that they all kind of neatly fit into one category. I titled this category, "It's My Calling / It's Extremely Rewarding." Almost every single response that was positive about being a therapist fit in this category. So let me read to you some of the replies that folks gave in this category. I have to. It is my calling. It's a sacred honor to be part of my client's healing journey. I found out I was made for this. I love seeing clients' aha moments. Watching someone heal is incredibly beautiful. Clearly, these are all different responses, but they have just such a similar thread to them, at least to me as I read them. They just felt like this is what I was made for. This is my calling. This is so rewarding. So again, let me reiterate that almost everything on the positive side of being a therapist falls quite neatly into this category of it being my calling or it being extremely rewarding. All right, so let's now move on to responses that fit onto the more negative side of things. And I saw generally 2 broader themes pop up. One that I titled poor pay / lack of benefits, and another that I labeled as demands are too high / licensure is too difficult. And in my mind, those kind of all fall under the same umbrella of not getting adequately compensated. If we're being overworked or there's too many hoops to jump through to get licensed, if we were more adequately compensated, those might also not be as much of an issue. So let's read some of the responses folks gave in the poor pay and lack of benefits category. Getting a PhD was a long road, and sometimes I don't feel well compensated for a doctorate degree. I love the job, just wish I had a higher income. Someone else says, I would have gone into another helping profession that makes more money. Are we hearing a theme here? Yes. And here's some of the responses that I put in the category of the demands being too high or that licensure is too difficult. Someone says, I have so much respect for therapists, but that process to get licensed was so difficult. I don't know because I hate paperwork so much, LOL. And someone else says, being pre-licensed, it's hard to be optimistic. The amount of hours and insufficient is tough. I think maybe that was a typo there, and I wonder if they meant insufficient pay is tough. I don't want to assume, but that's kind of what I assume. To me, as I look at it through my eyes, it seems that for the folks who responded yes to this question, it seems like they found some sense of balance between the work feeling like meaningful, rewarding work with clients and being compensated enough to support their livelihood. Or if they feel like they're not being compensated enough, then perhaps they're prioritizing the value of how meaningful the work is enough that they're still willing to choose the profession even if it feels like it's not compensating them enough. And then on the other hand, it seems to me that for those who said they're at least unsure about whether they'd become a therapist again, they just couldn't seem to justify the calling and the sense of meaning that comes from the work, given how poor the compensation and benefits were, or just how difficult it is to become licensed, or how overworked they have to be in order to do this job. I just realized my lighting was really bright. Hopefully I didn't look like an alien for too long. So if we just take things at face value and look at it on the surface, it seems like this is a relatively simple problem, but the solution to the problem might be a little more complicated. Now, I tried looking into it a little more to see if there's any available studies, surveys, research about how satisfied therapists are with their career, and I was kind of surprised to find that there is not much out there. But I will share a couple of things that I did find in the land of the internet, so let's take a look. There's a website called Career Explorer that I hadn't heard of before, honestly, so I don't know how legitimate the information is that they have here, but they have a piece on their website called Are Counselors Happy? And they say right at the top, counselors rate their happiness above average. Counselors rate their career happiness 3.5 out of 5 stars, which puts them in the top 31% of careers. Now that's a big claim, and as I heard that, I thought, where did you come up with 3.5 out of 5 stars? They have a few different variables that they took into account. So the first variable they take a look at is, are counselors happy with their salary? And counselors rated their satisfaction with their salaries as a 2.7 out of 5. It goes on to say here, counselors tend to be quite unhappy with their salary, with very few reporting satisfaction with their pay. But there's a number of other variables that they take a look at, which I think are important to ask, but also may have kind of skewed how they came up with these results. So some other variables that they looked at are, do counselors find their jobs meaningful, which came out to 3.8 out of 5. Another variable they look at is, how well are people's personalities suited to everyday tasks as counselors? And for that one, folks rated 4.1 out of 5. The next variable they look at is, how enjoyable is a counselor's work environment? And that one, folks rated 3.8 out of 5. And lastly, they looked at, are counselors making the best use of their abilities? And that one rated 3.5 out of 5. So one thing I wonder about as I read this is it possible that the combination of variables and how they weighted each of them doesn't necessarily amount to happiness overall? Even if everything about your career is great except your salary is poor, if it's poor enough, you may still be very unhappy. In that sense, I'm just not sure if things shake out to a 3.5 out of 5 stars on a happiness scale. But it is really interesting to see the individual variables broken down, and those seem to display the same kind of dichotomy that we talked about in the replies folks sent in. The work itself is incredibly meaningful and can be quite satisfying, but oftentimes the pay is really poor. So what do we do with that? We have a huge systemic issue that does not value mental health care enough. And that also is reflected in how many dollars are invested in mental health care. As a result, therapists who are working within the system are also not cared for well and not compensated adequately. So let me be explicitly clear about a belief that I hold. Mental health care should be more adequately funded on a systemic level. Period. Full stop. And for those of us who still choose this profession, despite how inadequately funded it is, it's up to each of us to decide based on our individual needs and values how to go about doing this career. Now, that may mean for some folks they opt out of this profession altogether. Some folks may opt to choose a more profitable route of their career just so that they can fund their livelihood, and some folks may choose to work in a setting that doesn't have as high of compensation, but maybe it aligns with their values, or maybe for the moment that's what they're able to find right now and they're making it work. Now, I'm sure there's way more nuance to this than my little Instagram poll could unearth. Ultimately, I hope everyone feels a sense of agency to choose a career path that fits best for you, your needs, and your values, and yeah, your paycheck also. That's important. We have to pay for our lives. I don't want anyone to feel stuck in whatever the situation is if it's not a good fit for them. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing, and they have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users. If you'd like to check out TherapyNotes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, thank you to everyone who participated in the Instagram poll. And for those of you watching who maybe didn't participate in the poll, feel free to leave a comment below elaborating on reasons why you feel satisfied or not so satisfied as a therapist so others can glean from your experience as well. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.